more developments from West Asia. An Axios report now says that the US Central Command, the CENTCOM, has prepared a plan for a short but powerful wave of strikes on Iran to break the deadlock in the talks. And as per the report, after the strikes, which would likely include infrastructure targets, the US would press Iran to come back to the negotiating table and show more flexibility. Donald Trump, in a conversation with Axios, said that he will keep Iran under a naval blockade until the country addresses America's concerns about Iranian nuclear programs. And Trump also said that a blockade on the Strait of Hormuz is more effective than bombing. Well, this report and Trump's latest remarks come hours after US President Donald Trump's post on Truth Social, in which he is seen posing with a gun, with a caption which says Iran cannot get their act together, they better get smart soon, and a big fat text saying no more Mr. Nice Guy. Iranian officials, on the other hand, have said that the war is not a solution. And as a stalemate continues, Iran's deputy foreign minister said that war will not resolve the ongoing crisis and stressed on diplomacy as the only viable path forward. Now, the top Iranian official also said that Iran has put forward proposals to end the war based on quote-unquote equal terms and conditions. The first and only round of talks so far between Iran and US took place on the 11th of April in Islamabad. Those talks lasted for 21 hours. J.D. Vance, along with the negotiating team, had traveled all the way to Islamabad, and there was no conclusion at the end of those talks. They were scheduled to continue, but in the middle, we heard from the US Vice President that the talks are over, and he went back to the US. Those negotiations ended without any breakthrough. In the following days and all these weeks later as well, top Iranian leaders such as the Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, they've visited Pakistan several times. He's in fact visited Pakistan thrice in a matter of 48 hours, but there is no talk face-to-face with the Americans so far. I'll now go back to our US correspondent, Susan, my colleague who's joining us from New York. Susan, won't be just discussing this. There is a stark contrast which is emerging. This Axios report suggests that the US CENTCOM might be ready now to carry out a short but powerful spree of bombardments yet again. And just earlier, we've learned that Putin and Trump had that 1.5-hour phone call where they are perhaps discussing the elongation of the ceasefire. Where do you see this one going? Because Trump is saying that economic fury is perhaps doing better than epic fury.
Yeah, it's no doubt that economic fury is really putting a strain on the Iranians on the one hand. But on the other hand, perhaps it was Putin that was concerned about this CENTCOM plan that suggested that the ceasefire should continue. And whether or not the Trump administration has already made up its mind, just moving military assets in the last couple of weeks to the region, more of them, and that they want to bring Iran to the negotiating table via threats, or is this a plan for an all-out escalation and an all-out war once again? And I think the wording is very significant because this is a plan that CENTCOM has put together. Axios is not all out reporting that the United States is keen to carry out this attack. So is it a negotiating tactic, or are they really planning on attacking? One would argue both ways. If they are planning on attacking, one of the reasons for that, and it being very short, would be because President Trump wants to wrap this thing up as soon as possible because he doesn't have the support here. And we're just, as we're talking, hearing his Secretary of War and the General Commander answering questions on Capitol Hill. On the other hand, if he continues with the ceasefire, the last thing that Trump wants to do is be viewed as someone like Barack Obama, where he just continued negotiation for the sake of negotiation and then came up with a deal that the next president can ultimately throw away. So he's in a peculiar situation. For the benefit of the headlines, it may be better that this war doesn't start. But on the other hand, knowing the Trump administration and his temperament and really just not having a lot of patience, you can't underscore the importance that they may just go in all out and relaunch the war. And I think that discussion with Putin was very important in the backdrop of this.
Very pertinently noted that, Susan, and highlighted that for our viewers as well, because till now, and in fact, even till February 28th, one could have dismissed a possible attack. But all that we've seen from Trump 2.0, you can't dismiss it anymore. This president is ready to pull the trigger, as well as what we've understood so far. Whether they're going to still achieve peace through strength, that seems to be a central doctrine in terms of their diplomacy approach. That seems to be very much in place even now, even when it comes to the Iranians. Who's going to buckle first? That seems to be the question. They've already spent $25 billion so far on the war. Will it continue? There is a tough time that Hegseth is already facing from the Democrats in the committee that he's facing currently. We'll continue to track those latest developments. That was Susan, my colleague, our US correspondent, joining me from New York.